Do you want to know what's scarier than anything in this film? It's the fact that Universal paid $400 million for the rights to this series, only for the film to turn out like this. And they have 2 more planned.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Don't be scared.
We've met before.
Are you looking for Reagan?
Are you looking for Reagan?
How's it going, guys? Welcome back to my channel and time for another episode of Luke's Reviews. Well, it's coming to the end of October, or depending on when this video comes out, it's November, Halloween season has passed, and we finally have a horror film that is deciding to come out around Halloween. And oh, how I wish it hadn't. Here is my review of The Exorcist, Believer. 2 schoolgirls head off to the forest without their parents' knowledge and wind up disappearing for 3 days. When they're found, they only believe they were missing for a few hours. As they return home, that's when strange occurrences begin, not to mention irrational and violent behavior from both girls. After exhausting all medical explanations, both families soon turn to their last hope, an exorcism. I'm going to start off this review by saying that whilst I think it is a terrific movie that has more than stood the test of time, I'm not in the camp that thinks The Exorcist is the greatest and scariest horror of all time. But I will stress, it's a great movie. And therefore, I was largely ambivalent towards Universal and Blumhouse seemingly picking up and continuing the series. I was less impressed when I heard they were bringing back Burstyn as Chris MacNeil, as I thought that chapter was closed and not something that needed revisiting. And then, I became terrified once it was revealed that David Gordon Green and his writing team from the recent Halloween movies were jumping on board to oversee everything. Side note, does this team have it in for classic horror franchises or something? First they drove Halloween into the ground, and now they want their hands on The Exorcist?
Evil dies tonight! Evil dies tonight! Evil dies tonight!
Shut up! Shut up! Shut the fuck up!
The marketing did nothing to raise my expectations, and by the time reviews started coming in saying it was a waste of time, it didn't come as a shock. So what did I think? Well, I didn't hate the first 20 minutes, so that's something, I guess. The Exorcist Believer didn't exactly start off strong, but it did lay some reasonably solid groundwork, introducing our new characters and predicament that the girls find themselves in. There were more than a few Exorcist member berries thrown in, but for the most part it did a decent job of standing on its own 2 feet. And then, probably around the 40-minute mark, that's when it became a sequel to the 1973 original, and that was when the entirety of the remaining 70 minutes failed spectacularly. Firstly, there was no need to tie this into Chris and Reagan's story besides illogical fan service. The moment when Burstyn steps onto screen and we hear about her life since her daughter's exorcism, her opinion of it all, and how she gets involved with this new case, was borderline insulting to the original. Not to mention, it was a criminal waste of Burstyn and how they treat her character. Now, I don't want to compare this sequel constantly to the original, but when it spends the rest of its runtime attempting to replicate story beats or directly referencing the original, then you can't help but do so. And it's clear that David Gordon Green and his team simply didn't understand what William Friedkin and William Peter Blatty were trying to accomplish with their film. As much as it was a film about a shocking exorcism, it was also a heart-wrenching tale of a mother and her sick daughter, as well as a priest who is struggling with his faith. There's absolutely none of that nuance here. Green and co. treat it like it's an exorcism movie and nothing more. Now, performance-wise, besides the two girls who are clearly asked to do some of the heavy lifting, the rest of the cast fall by the wayside. Leslie Odom Jr. is the lead of the film, but carries with him an emotionally vacant performance. He's witnessing these horrific things happening to his daughter, and his only reaction is to walk around with his mouth hanging open. It's also a waste of Ann Dowd's talents. She's saddled with doing the brunt of the exorcism readings, but there's no real gravitas from her. There's also hardly any scares to be found. A number of predictable jump scares, far too much reliance on having a spooky image flash on screen briefly, and come the possession and exorcism itself, they're also tame. In 1973, watching the defiling and grotesque acts this little girl was committing had people passing out in the cinema. The Exorcist Believer is rated 15 and doesn't even think to push the boundaries a little. Of all the legacy sequels that have come and gone in recent years, there hasn't been one that has had quite the wistful disdain for its predecessor as The Exorcist Believer does. Treating the original as if it were old news, the film then decides to piggyback on it. Despite a reasonably decent attempt to tell a new story, it loses sight of what The Exorcist was all about in the process. Character arcs are atrociously written, the actual horror feels confusingly watered down, and by the time the third act rolls around, it was clear that the team had given up at that point. The power of Christ compels you not to see this film. So, I'm going to give The Exorcist Believer a 2.5 out of 10. Anyway guys, those are my thoughts on The Exorcist Believer. Let me know, what did you think of the film? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And my question to you, is there a horror franchise out there that you would be foaming at the mouth if they had turned around and said that they're looking to reboot it? Or maybe not reboot it, but put together a legacy sequel. Let me know. But that is all the time we have for today, so thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hello, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure to click that like button, and if you aren't already, click that subscribe button too.